On the morning the city learned she would be duchess, the bells of St. Alaric rang not in celebration but in warning. Their iron voices rolled through the fog like judgment, low and relentless, as if even God paused to consider the wisdom of the match. Carriages slowed upon the cobbled streets, drivers craning their necks, footmen whispering behind gloved hands. In drawing-rooms warmed by coal fires and scented with bergamot, women leaned closer to one another, their sympathy polished, their cruelty effortless. She heard none of it directly, yet every murmur found its way to her, settling upon her shoulders like ash. She had been known once for gentleness. That, at least, was how her mother spoke of her, back when gentleness was still considered a virtue worth defending. Now it was called weakness. Now it was the reason, they said, she had been chosen. The Duke did not require beauty to soften his reputation, nor fortune to enlarge his own. He required obedience, silence, and a wife who would not ask him to be kind. In this, society agreed, she was perfectly suited. They called him cruel without ever lowering their voices. The Duke of Ashbourne, a man carved from reserve and shadow, whose gaze was said to empty rooms and whose temper dismissed servants as easily as one brushed lint from a sleeve. No one spoke of his age, though it was guessed. No one spoke of his heart, though its absence was assumed. It was enough to say his name and watch smiles tighten, laughter falter, posture improve. Fear had a way of teaching etiquette. She first saw him properly at a winter reception, though properly was perhaps the wrong word. She saw his outline more than his face, tall and still beneath a chandelier that trembled slightly, as if aware of him. While others orbited the room in practiced arcs, he remained unmoved, a fixed point around which discomfort gathered. When introduced, he bowed with exact courtesy, his eyes lifting only long enough to acknowledge her presence, not her person. In that moment, she understood something dreadful and irrevocable. She was not a woman to him, but a conclusion. The days that followed passed in a haze of preparation and restraint. Modistes arrived, their needles sharp, their praise hollow. Relatives spoke to her gently, as one might to a patient preparing for surgery. Invitations arrived embossed and inevitable. Each morning, she woke with the same tightness beneath her ribs, the same certainty that she had been miscast in a role she did not audition for. Each night, she imagined the Duke's house, vast and unyielding, waiting to close around her like a mausoleum. What wounded her most was not fear, but pity. She caught it in reflections and pauses, in the way conversations stalled when she entered a room. At tea, a matron patted her hand too warmly and said, "You will grow accustomed to him." As if marriage were weather. As if cruelty were climate. She smiled because she had been taught to, because the alternative would have been unseemly, and unseemliness was the one transgression she could not afford. On the eve of the announcement, she stood alone in her father's library, tracing the spines of books she would soon leave behind. The house smelled of dust and ink and memory. Here, she had learned to read, to listen, to wait her turn. Here, she had believed patience might one day be rewarded. The belief felt foolish now, like a child's prayer whispered into an empty room. When the formal notice was published, the city reacted with a singular, stunned interest. There were those who claimed surprise, those who claimed foresight, and those who claimed concern while savoring every detail. Speculation bloomed like mold. Why her? What had been promised? What had been overlooked? No one asked what had been lost. She moved through the day as through water, aware of every sound yet untouched by any of it. That afternoon, she encountered the Duke again, briefly, at her father's door. He arrived alone, his coat dark against the pale stone, his expression unreadable. He spoke little, and when he did, it was with precision, each word placed as carefully as a chess piece. He did not congratulate her. He did not reassure her. He thanked her father, inclined his head to her, and departed. Only when he was gone did she realize her hands were trembling. She did not open it at once. The weight of the seal seemed heavier than paper deserved, as though it carried with it the full measure of his authority and her surrender. Around her, the house settled into sleep, each creak of timber sounding like a farewell. She thought of the vows she would soon speak, words rehearsed for centuries by women whose fears had been considered unremarkable. She wondered whether courage was something one summoned, or something demanded by circumstance. Drawing a breath that felt like crossing a threshold, She rested her fingers upon the envelope, aware that whatever waited inside had already begun to alter the shape of her dread, forever altering her path. Night fell early. Candles were lit. Outside, rain began its quiet negotiation with the windows. She sat at her dressing table, unpinning her hair, studying the face she would soon be required to present to the world as fearless. In the mirror, she looked younger than she felt, older than she wished. Tomorrow, she would belong to a man she did not know, in a house that did not love her, under a name that would erase the one she had learned to answer to. A knock came, soft but deliberate. A servant entered and placed a sealed envelope upon the table, its wax unbroken, its crest unmistakable. No note of explanation accompanied it. No apology. Only the mark of the Duke, pressed deep and certain, as if the future itself had leaned close enough to leave an impression. Morning arrived carrying the consequences of the Duke's seal, though nothing yet had been said aloud. In the days that followed, objects began to appear around her with unsettling precision. A shawl of winter blue will lay folded upon her chair, its weave warmer than any she owned. A book of sermons she once mentioned in passing replaced a missing volume on her father's shelf. Each token arrived without card or flourish, delivered silently, as if the Duke preferred his presence felt rather than announced. Gratitude tangled with unease, for attention could bind as tightly as vows themselves without spoken consent. Society noticed, of course, and misread everything. Whispers threaded through salons that the Duke was displaying ownership, not affection. Some admired the efficiency, others warned it was how cages were lined before doors closed. She heard a laugh behind a fan when the shawl appeared at luncheon, and felt heat climb her neck. The Duke himself remained distant, attending functions with grave courtesy, speaking little, observing much. His eyes, dark and assessing, followed conversations rather than faces, as though measuring truths people betrayed without knowing. Such watchfulness unsettled her more than any cruelty ever rumored about him within the city. At a charity musicale, the tension sharpened into something perilous. A guest, careless with wine and confidence, remarked that the future duchess seemed unusually fortunate, given her modest prospects. Silence fell, brittle as glass. She prepared to smile, to swallow the insult whole, when the Duke rose. He did not rebuke the speaker. He thanked the hostess, praised the musicians, and suggested the evening conclude early. Authority moved with him, unquestioned. By dawn, the remark had vanished from conversation, as though erased by a steadier hand. Gratitude flared briefly, chased by dread at how easily he controlled outcomes around them. She sought him out once, compelled by obligation and an unfamiliar pull. In a gallery washed with afternoon light, she thanked him with careful formality. He listened without interruption, hands clasped behind his back, posture immaculate. When she finished, he inclined his head and said her comfort mattered to him, precisely and without warmth. The words unsettled her more than tenderness would have. Comfort implied vigilance, proximity, an attention that neither retreated nor soothed. As she left, she sensed his gaze upon her, steady as a vow. She wondered whether cruelty and care might wear the same disciplined face there. Rumor, thwarted, grew inventive. Someone suggested the Duke had purchased her loyalty, another claimed she had ensnared him through tears. The city preferred simple sins. Invitations cooled, then warmed again when his name appeared beside hers. She felt herself becoming an object traded between interpretations. Yet amid the noise, a pattern emerged she could not ignore. The Duke intervened only when dignity was threatened, never when pride demanded spectacle. His restraint felt deliberate, almost protective, and that realization frightened her more than open domination ever could have done. It suggested choice, discernment, and a man watching boundaries with intent closely. One evening, she discovered the sermons returned again, this time annotated in a neat, severe hand. Margins bore questions rather than judgments. Why this passage? What fear does it name? The intimacy startled her. He had not corrected her thoughts. He had joined them. She closed the book, heart unsteady, realizing she had been seen without being summoned. Such attention was rarer than flowers. It carried responsibility. For the first time, she imagined the Duke alone with his thoughts, and the image refused to harden into cruelty. Instead, it lingered, complex and human, troubling her carefully maintained fears at last. The scandal arrived quietly, as scandals often do. A letter circulated alleging impropriety, hinting she sought advantage through intimacy. Its language was elegant, its cruelty precise. Before she could respond, the Duke acted. He did not confront accusers, he invited them. A dinner followed, impeccably hosted, after which the letter was never mentioned again. The silence that replaced it was total. She understood then the breadth of his influence, and the danger of standing so close to it. Protection, she realized, exacted its own price, binding the protected to the protector by invisible threads woven through society itself at large. She began to watch him in return. Not for cruelty, but for mercy. She noticed how he delayed judgments, how he offered exits instead of corners. Once, she saw him dismiss a servant with compensation and a reference, his voice low, his expression grave. The story that followed exaggerated harshness, yet she knew the truth. The knowledge isolated her. To defend him would invite ridicule, to remain silent felt like complicity. Thus affection, uninvited, learned to live inside restraint, growing sharper for its confinement. It was safer to fear him, she told herself, than to hope in such circumstances now. On a night thick with candle smoke and expectation, he spoke to her again. Briefly, formally, yet with an undercurrent that stilled her breath. He said the world would test her and that he would not. He said she owed him nothing beyond honesty. The statement felt like a door opening onto uncertainty. Trust, she realized, might be the most perilous gift of all. As music swelled and laughter resumed, she stood altered, carrying a fragile question she dared not yet ask. Whether safety could exist beside power, or love beside such watchful restraint within the marriage awaiting her now. Later, alone, she returned to the sealed envelope, still unopened, still heavy with implication. The city slept, confident in its conclusions. She broke the wax at last. Inside lay a single page, spare and unmistakably his. No command waited there, no demand for gratitude. Only a sentence, written with controlled care, that acknowledged her fear without naming it. As she read, the room seemed to lean closer, for the Duke had not claimed her obedience. He had asked for her courage. And in that quiet request, the balance between dread and possibility shifted for the first time here within her. The night before the wedding arrived without ceremony, as though even time wished to pass unnoticed. Rain stitched silver threads across the windows of Ashbourne House, blurring the gardens into impression and shadow. Inside, corridors glowed with lamplight and restraint. Servants moved softly, aware that history was settling into place. She sat in a small drawing-room she had not yet earned the right to claim, hands folded, spine straight, listening to the measured tick of a clock that marked each remaining hour of her solitude. She had been summoned, not commanded, a distinction that mattered to her more than she wished to admit. When the Duke entered, he closed the door himself, a simple act that altered the room's gravity. He wore no ornament, only a dark coat and the fatigue of a man who had stood too long with his thoughts. For a moment they regarded one another across the hearth, the fire whispering between them like a confidant uncertain whom to trust. He gestured for her to sit, then remained standing, as if unwilling to claim comfort he had not yet earned. "I will not keep you long," he said, voice even, precise. "Tomorrow asks much of us both." She inclined her head, the movement practiced, though her pulse betrayed her. Silence followed, not empty but deliberate. He seemed to measure the space for honesty, as one might test ice before stepping onto it. When he spoke again, it was not of arrangements or propriety, but of choice. He said marriage often arrived like weather, unavoidable and misread. He said fear was not a failure of character, but a signal worthy of attention. The words unsettled her defenses, arranged carefully over years to survive expectations without complaint. She surprised herself by answering. She confessed, not dramatically, but with the steady clarity of someone long denied an audience. She spoke of becoming small in rooms full of opinion, of learning to smile at judgments she could not correct. She admitted that she feared disappearing beneath a title heavier than her name, feared being required to endure rather than invited to belong. As she spoke, her voice wavered only once, when she acknowledged the particular terror of disappointing a man whose silence carried consequence. He listened without interruption. When she faltered, he did not rush her forward. The fire shifted, rain pressed harder against the glass. At last he said her name, gently, as if testing its shape. He told her he did not expect love, nor obedience masquerading as peace. He said he would not accept a marriage built on endurance alone. The declaration landed with quiet force. She had been prepared for demands, for bargains dressed as kindness. Instead, he offered restraint, a discipline rarer than passion. She asked, then, the question that had haunted her. Why her? He did not answer at once. He crossed to the window, gazed into the rain as though consulting memory. When he turned back, his expression had softened into something unguarded. He said he had watched her bear cruelty without performing it, had seen her choose dignity when spectacle was easier. He said such strength was often mistaken for fragility, and punished accordingly. He admitted that he recognized himself in that misjudgment, and did not wish to perpetuate it. The room seemed to breathe with them. She felt a tremor of recognition, not romantic, but profound. For the first time, the Duke's reputation fractured, revealing a man shaped by vigilance rather than malice. She realized his cruelty, as the world named it, might have been a defense refined to sharpness by necessity. The thought did not excuse fear, but it complicated it, opening a narrow passage toward understanding she had not believed possible hours earlier. He moved closer, then stopped, respecting a boundary she had not voiced. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will be watched. Every silence will be interpreted. I cannot shield you from that." He paused. "But I will not add to it." The promise was modest, yet it felt immense. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. In that moment, she sensed the fragile architecture of trust beginning, built not on assurance, but on restraint honored. When he took his leave, he did so with a bow that acknowledged her agency, not her surrender. The door closed softly behind him. She remained seated, aware of a change within her, subtle yet irrevocable. Fear had not vanished, but it had shifted, making room for something like courage, tentative and untrained. Outside, the rain eased. She rose and approached the fire, holding her hands toward warmth that did not demand anything in return. She paced the chamber once, then twice, feeling the weight of silk beneath her fingers and the echo of his restraint within her chest. Never had a man granted her space as an act of respect rather than neglect. It frightened her more than threats ever could. Choice required courage. Submission required only endurance. She recognized, with a clarity that startled her, that tomorrow would test not merely her obedience, but her voice. The Duke had not promised tenderness, yet he had offered something rarer, the right to remain whole. As sleep finally approached, fragile and uncertain, she understood the danger ahead was no longer the marriage itself, but the possibility that she might learn to hope within it. The day had arrived with a brittle clarity, as if the world itself held its breath for the ceremony. Candles flickered in long windows, casting light upon stone floors polished to reflect both expectation and dread. Carriages rolled through the mist-laden avenue, their horses stamping impatiently, unaware of the human burdens within. Within the grand hall, laughter shimmered like glass, delicate and brittle, as guests admired silk, jewelry, and the delicate coordination of florals arranged with an artful hand. Yet she felt apart, a spectator to a spectacle in which her own emotions had no place. The Duke remained aloof throughout the procession, a figure of precise composure. His coat was dark as winter, his collar crisp, his gloves fitting with an accuracy that suggested discipline more than ceremony. He did not offer reassurance, nor did he allow cruelty to leak through the measured lines of his face. In that, he was more formidable than rumor had described, for it was not fury she feared but the weight of restraint, a power unclaimed yet absolute. She watched him from the corner of her eye, heart oscillating between terror and a nascent curiosity, as though the tension alone were a prelude to discovery. When the vows began, her voice quavered only slightly, a tremor she excused as nerves, though she knew it was deeper than propriety could explain. His gaze, precise and unwavering, met hers for a heartbeat longer than social custom allowed. The world, chandeliers, polished floors, all fell into a faint blur. Every whisper, every gasped admiration, became secondary to the silent exchange of presence. Her body recognized the weight of his observation, yet for the first time it did not crush her. It asked, only for attention. Attendance, not surrender. The ceremony concluded with polished applause, but she felt no triumph, no elation. Instead, a new stage unfolded within the private chambers awaiting her beyond the gilded doors. There, firelight softened walls adorned with portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to measure her claim. The room was rich with candles, their flickering reflections lending intimacy to what was otherwise vast and impersonal. She entered, gown brushing the polished floor, hands trembling as though carrying more than silk and lace. The Duke followed silently, closing the door behind him with the soft finality of inevitability. He did not speak immediately. He removed his gloves with deliberate precision, placing them aside as though shedding armor that had long defined him. His eyes held hers, dark and unyielding, yet stripped of judgment. He seated himself in a high-backed chair by the hearth, leaving space, leaving choice. She remained standing, as one might before a winter tree, unsure whether to trust its branches or recoil from its height. Time stretched thin, each moment became taut with expectation, the air weighted with unspoken possibilities. Then he spoke, quietly, each word deliberate. "Are you afraid?" The question was not accusatory, not teasing. It was simple, direct, and without pretense. She froze, as if the room itself had inhaled. No one had ever asked her this, not her father, not the matronly advisers, not even her own reflection. It was not a query of compliance, but of acknowledgment, of recognition that her feelings mattered within this carefully arranged structure. The weight of it startled her more than fear ever had. She hesitated, breathing shallow. To admit it would be to confess vulnerability in a space historically inhospitable to it. Yet the question offered safety, paradoxical and rare. Slowly, deliberately, she nodded, barely, the motion a surrender of honesty rather than authority. His eyes softened fractionally, though his presence remained commanding. "Then you are right to feel so," he said, voice measured. "For tomorrow is not certain, nor is any man's mercy. Yet I wish to be neither threat nor judge. You will be asked for courage, not for obedience." Her chest rose with a fragile exhale, relief mingled with residual dread. She realized that this man, rumored cruel, feared not her, but the erosion of choice itself. He offered restraint, not affection, attention, not coercion, acknowledgment, not dismissal. And in that measured consideration, she felt the stirrings of a trust previously unimaginable. Perhaps courage could be nurtured, not demanded. Perhaps hope could exist in the careful shadow of power. He rose, walking closer, each step deliberate, maintaining a distance she had not voiced. "I have been misjudged, as you fear you will be," he admitted, voice lower now, intimate in its gravity. "I am not cruel in the manner the city suggests. I am precise, observant, vigilant. Such qualities are misread as harshness, yet they are all I have to offer in this world." His gaze lingered, a dark assessment softened by the first trace of candor. She absorbed each word, aware that she was witnessing not a performance, but the shaping of a man's truth under the quiet pressure of history. Her hands, still trembling, found one another. The firelight danced across them, casting gold upon pale skin. "And if I cannot meet your expectations," she whispered, voice tentative, the chamber itself seeming to hold its breath, "then I will honor your truth as best I can," he replied. "And in turn, you may honor your own. There is no need for deceit between us. Only honesty, fragile though it may be." The intimacy of their exchange, restrained yet charged, shifted the chamber's atmosphere. Fear no longer pressed upon her chest as it had all morning. It softened into an acute awareness of the choices still available to her. The Duke's words were not promises of passion, but of permission, to be herself, to retain dignity, to navigate the unknown with autonomy. It was a gift she had not anticipated, one more powerful than comfort, more formidable than any public ceremony. He stepped back, restoring the space between them, yet the tension remained, recalibrated. "Tomorrow," he said, softer now, "you will be asked to walk alongside me in the eyes of the world. Tonight, I ask only that you remain yourself. Fear, courage, hope, they are yours to bear or release. None may dictate them but you." The candor, the restraint, the acknowledgment of her agency, created a gravity that both freed and bound her simultaneously. She nodded again, understanding, with a clarity that surprised her, that the marriage would test not only her endurance but her voice. She had been prepared for coercion, for formality, for cold indifference. Instead, she encountered a question, the simplest possible, that demanded honesty above all. In answering it, she glimpsed the first possibility of equality, however tentative, within the bond about to be formalized. A tremor of hope threaded through fear, fragile and unclaimed. As the candle flames flickered low and the rain whispered against tall windows, she realized the paradox. The Duke, feared and misunderstood, had given her a power far greater than ceremony could bestow, the right to exist unshadowed in his presence. Fear remained, yet it no longer defined her entirely. The room, once vast and oppressive, seemed to shrink, containing instead the delicate possibility of trust. And in that quiet, she understood that the question posed had changed everything, though the answer had not yet fully formed. The night waited, as did the dawn, and the final measure of courage remained hers alone to summon. Dawn spilled through the tall windows of Ashbourne House, soft as powdered light, gilding the edges of curtains and portraits alike. The city beyond remained shrouded in mist, cobblestones glistening with overnight rain, as though the world had conspired to grant the newlyweds a private pause before society resumed its scrutiny. Inside, the Duke moved with quiet purpose, inspecting the chambers with a precision that was at once commanding and intimate. Each gesture carried the weight of habit, each step measured, yet somehow lighter than the iron stiffness he had displayed during public ceremonies. He had revealed pieces of himself before, but today something unspoken threaded beneath every action. Anticipation tempered with uncertainty, vulnerability threaded through discipline. She observed him from the corner of the room, her gown whispering against polished floors, hands still trembling, though steadier than the night prior. Her heart bore remnants of the question he had asked. "Are you afraid?" Its echo woven through her every thought. She had discovered courage as something quietly cultivated, a fragile companion rather than a shield. Today, courage would be tested, but not merely by ceremony or obligation. Today, it would confront the full measure of human intimacy and the unpredictable contours of a man she had begun to understand. The household moved around them in careful orchestration, servants gliding silently, the scent of roses mingling with smoke from the hearth, silver polished to gleam with a prideful exactitude. And yet, within this orchestrated elegance, there remained an unspoken solitude, a bubble of stillness that held only the Duke and herself. It was within this fragile isolation that the true test of their bond waited, unseen by the world outside. He approached her, not abruptly, not demanding, but with deliberate steps that allowed for recognition of her space, her presence, her agency. "The day will ask much," he said, voice quiet yet resonant, carrying the authority that had first inspired fear, now tempered by familiarity. "And yet, the question remains, do you wish to walk beside me willingly, or simply endure?" The phrasing startled her, for endurance had been her training, her armor, but the offer of willingness demanded honesty, vulnerability, and a bravery she had only begun to glimpse. Her eyes met his, and in that gaze she caught the full spectrum of the man before her. Formidable, measured, capable of sternness, yet capable of restraint so precise it bordered on revelation. He did not command love, nor did he presume compliance. He sought truth, a rare currency, and her recognition of it stirred an unexpected thrill of empowerment. The room seemed to contract, shadows drawing near in quiet attention, firelight flickering across polished wood, as though the walls themselves awaited the answer that would define the beginning, not merely of a marriage, but of a shared existence. "I wish," she said at last, voice steady yet soft, "to walk beside you, not behind you." The declaration, simple in structure yet monumental in consequence, hung between them. Her own words startled her, for they were not rehearsed, nor extracted by coercion. They were hers, born of observation, of insight, of fear transmuted into clarity. The Duke's expression shifted imperceptibly, relief mingling with something more elusive, a shadow of awe that reflected both his respect and his dawning recognition that he had not only observed her but had been seen himself. He extended his hand, a gesture formal yet intimate, as though offering a bridge between fear and partnership. She accepted it, the warmth of contact searing through careful composure, affirming a delicate equilibrium. Choice held within constraint, power tempered by respect. In that instant, every rumor, every whispered prediction of cruelty, Every carefully measured expectation of compliance dissolved. The man before her was neither tyrant nor phantom. He was flesh, thought, and unguarded possibility. She felt the full weight of her own judgment lifting, replaced by a tentative, exquisite awareness of agency. Outside, the city began its daily rhythm, carriages rattling along stone, bells chiming faintly in the distance. Yet within Ashbourne House a new cadence had taken root. Breath drawn, hands joined, eyes acknowledging truths previously unspoken. The Duke spoke then, softly, a cadence designed for intimacy rather than command. "Fear has its place," he admitted, "but so does trust. I offer you the latter, if you accept it. Not as submission, but as partnership. Not as surrender, but as recognition." The words landed with gravity, and yet carried lightness. The paradox of power exercised with restraint, of authority offered without imposition. She felt herself trembling once more, not with terror but with the recognition of possibility. Courage had been measured, fear had been respected, and choice, so long withheld from her, was finally recognized as sovereign. She realized that the Duke's reputation for cruelty had been a facade, a disciplined exterior forged to navigate a world that neither demanded nor rewarded openness. Beneath it lay a man capable of reflection, capable of restraint, capable of acknowledging the other without diminishing himself. The discovery was both intoxicating and terrifying. Minutes passed, marked only by the flicker of candlelight and the steady rhythm of their shared breath. He lowered himself into a chair beside the fire, maintaining the space between them yet closing the distance emotionally, allowing proximity without intrusion. "Tomorrow," he said, "the world will watch, and we will be performers in a drama not of our choosing. Tonight, there is only this room, only this truth, and only the recognition that we are neither enemies nor strangers. You may choose to fear or to trust. I will accept your answer, whatever it may be." She moved closer, drawn by a gravity both gentle and undeniable, the firelight reflecting in her eyes, her hair catching sparks of gold as she stepped into the tentative intimacy of proximity. "Then I choose trust," she whispered, and in that single utterance, the room seemed to breathe, the shadows leaning closer in quiet witness, the firelight dancing like approval across walls that had seen so many unions, yet never one quite like this. The Duke inclined his head, expression softened yet resolute. "Then we begin," he said simply. No grand gesture followed, no flourish of passion. Instead, a recognition of equality, of choice, of potential. The words were ordinary, yet monumental, for they established a foundation neither rumor nor tradition could dictate. The room, vast and ornate, contracted to the span of shared understanding, and in that contraction, the universe, if not entirely aligned, felt at last hospitable. They stood together, hands lightly clasped, observing the first light of morning spill across polished floors and gilded frames. Outside, carriages stirred, bells continued their distant recitation, yet within, time had shifted its measure to accommodate new truths. Courage acknowledged, fear transformed, agency reclaimed. The city might believe in the cruelty of the Duke, the inevitability of endurance, the mechanics of duty, but within these walls, a quiet revolution had taken place, witnessed only by firelight and two hearts aligned in hesitant understanding. And as the door to the world beyond awaited, with its expectations and whispers, she understood the paradox that had governed her life until this moment. The man reputed cruel was neither tyrant nor phantom, but a sentinel of choice, a guardian of dignity, and perhaps a mirror reflecting her own strength she had not known she possessed. The storm outside had ceased, leaving only the soft drip of rain from eaves, a gentle punctuation to an awakening realized in silence, in proximity, in recognition. The Duke turned slightly, gaze meeting hers, shadows softening his features. "The world will demand spectacles," he said quietly, "but tonight it is only us. Remember that. Fear may visit, yet choice remains. And in that, no one may command you but yourself." She nodded, heart still alight, aware of the fragile gravity they shared. Outside, life awaited judgment and expectation, but within, a different measure prevailed. Trust established, restraint honored, and the first, delicate threads of partnership woven against the backdrop of fear and reputation. In that quiet, intimate alignment, she realized the culmination was not a climax of passion, but of recognition, and in that recognition, a promise both terrifying and exhilarating. That even amidst expectation, rumor, and obligation, agency, dignity, and the possibility of love remained intact. She stepped closer, mindful of her own heartbeat and the mirrored cadence of his, understanding that the marriage which had once loomed as a cage might, in truth, offer the rarest liberation. Mutual respect unclaimed by the world, witnessed only by the firelight and the hush of dawn.